very much. I'm very happy to be here. And I would like to start by thanking the Italian Association, especially Silvana Ordelia, for organizing this opportunity to share with you what we have found in different parts of Europe, which I hope will be of interest and use to all of social workers and all of the national associations involved here. I would like to actually, before I start with looking at this particular case, to say that we need to understand a little bit more the motives of the media, which range from wanting, I think, legitimately to say whatever they produce, more of it, and equally ending a range where people want to be very good investigative journalists. So there's a huge range here in between. The other thing that we do need to understand is the impact of the media. Although we can choose which media we look at and we use, we usually are much more influenced by the media the less we know something about a particular issue. We look to the media to inform us. And the question is, how good is the media in providing information? And also, can this information be provided without or not too much ideology, political values, and the emotional side of all of what we are dealing here with? In terms of social work, I think social work provides a challenge for the media. The fact that we have both a mandate for care and control is very confusing for the media. It must be. But equally, the fact that most of our activities as social workers are conducted in private means that the media doesn't have any regular access to it. And therefore, they use their imagination to provide coverage. I'm going now to...
Speak slowly.
I'm talking too fast for the translator. Sorry. Apologies. I'm going now to look at this particular case, and just to say that Ordine is a small town in Yorkshire. It used to be a center of steel making, and it was a prosperous place. Since the steel work has stopped, which relates to Mrs. Thatcher being Prime Minister at that time, the town hasn't really recovered. And you can see that in the photos which the different media shows about Ordine today. However, this particular issue, which is a scandal, there's no other way to describe it. And I know it's a very emotional word, but it is actually the correct word here. It has erupted dramatically after 14 years in the making at the end of August 2014. It's about child sexual abuse, and it's in fact not about children, but about young people from the age of 11 to about 18 and above. Its scale, the level of sexual exploitation, the systematic cover-up during those 14 years, there is a racial issue in addition that I will mention, and the views attributed to social workers require attention by social work researchers. It's not unique in the UK, unfortunately. We have cases similar to that in Rochdale, Oxford, Manchester, and I could mention other places. It has become an emblematic case. This is partly because of two major reports. It's not only the media, but the media using the reports. The jail report that I will say something about in a minute, and the case report that I will also relate to. Elena has been very good at outlining our methodology. In this particular case, I started when I was in a central train station, King's Cross, on a Sunday, and I suddenly saw the headlines of all of the newspapers about this thing, case, and I went and bought all of them. The people in the shop, in the newsagent, looked at me as though, I went out of my mind. But I really, I thought this is an opportunity to look at the whole range. From what we call tabloid to quality papers, right wing, left wing, middle, all of them. And this was a response to a report by a professor of social work, Alexis J., who has been invited by the council, by the local authority, the municipality of Roma, to provide that report. And on the second day, there was an unexpected television program that was not on the program list. It so happened that I was looking at it, and I saw the program. But if you didn't look by accident at that particular program, you wouldn't see it. I was particularly interested in the style of representation and the content, and here you have, what type of content I was interested in. I was equally interested in the complexity of the emotional and ideological messages that were given here. The fact there were 1,400 cases of sexually abused children by a group of adults unrelated to them over that period of 14 years, and for whom files were opened by social services and also often by the police. They were known to social services, they were known to the police. And a number of the victims were in care homes, which means they had a history of relationship with social services and who thought that it was necessary for them not to stay with their families but to live in a particular place for children. The police commissioner claimed not to know anything and refused to resign. What is important here, that commissioner was the head of social services 2 years before when he became the police commissioner. So you can see the interrelationship. The leader of the council resigned immediately. Head of social services resigned 3 weeks later. The inquiry report by Alexis J. and other people. We learned that there was a report about this issue at the very beginning of it, in the early 1990s, and it was suppressed. The researcher who was appointed by the Home Office was not allowed to publish it. All of the data was taken from her. She was not allowed to keep the computer data. And she was told not to mention the ethnic origin of the perpetrators because it was too sensitive. The report by Alexis J. I will go into some details in a minute. The government response. This was at the end of August. By February, we had a government inquiry. The government appointed its own investigator who leads a project called Troubled Families. Her name is Louise Casey. And she went with a couple of other researchers, and they came back and recommended that the council is not fit for purpose, that no member of the council, they are elected people by the inhabitants of Roma, were not seen as fit to continue in their job. And instead the government sent civil servants to run the council. Another consequence that I will focus a little bit about is that the Prime Minister says that that they would like to criminalize social workers, teachers, and policemen if they are found guilty of willful neglect of cases of young people sexual abuse. Here you have some of the photos of the articles, and I think those photos are important. You can't see much of the content now, but it's the headings, it's the people and the images. The little girl is not a girl related to the case, and we do not see her face, but she is dressed in white, which is the color of purity in Western societies. I mention Western societies because in Asian society it's actually the color of mourning. So, And the guy here is somebody who was found guilty of a similar crime in another place, not actually in Roma. The guy in the middle with the red hair is the police commissioner who was head of social services.
At least one.
And there are, the words are about horrific scale of wounding, quite a lot of very emotional type of headings. And this is the article about social workers who ignore sex abuse cases face 5 years in jail. Only when you start to read it, you can see that it's also about teachers and counselors and police. It's very interesting that they thought it's important to mention the social workers in the title, in the headline. And later you find it's not only social workers, but it's going to be also social workers. And you need to think, is this going to be a useful measure? Is this going to sort out anything for whom? Please remember we have national elections and local elections this Thursday on the 7th of May. The television program, which I said replaced unexpectedly another program, included a victim, a father, a police doctor, a researcher, a representative of the voluntary sector, a perpetrator photo, and background details. It clearly took the victim perspective, who felt that they were treated badly by the police, the council, and social services. But they did not interview Professor J. And if they tried to interview her, it was not mentioned. I was very interested, the television offers us very rich data because it covers the visual images and not only the words that people use, and you can see how their body language as well. And also they show Rotterdam more clearly than the newspapers. More photos than usual, more headline, more quotes. In terms of analysis, there's very little directly about social work in August 2014, when this case begins. But a lot more in February 2015, after the second report by the government investigator. The victims say that they felt they were treated as trash. I don't know what is the Italian word for trash. Spazzatura. Okay. It says it all. Yeah. That sense of really lack of dignity, which I'm very glad that the senator here mentioned the issue of dignity. And they were not perceived as a door to knock on by either the victims or their parents. But we have no direct response from the director of Rotterdam Social Services or from any other social worker there. Usually they are not allowed to communicate their responses. So, we have here a situation where the media can say what it wants, but the people involved professionally are not allowed to say anything, which we need to think about. The case report, the one by the government investigator, social workers are accused specifically about paying a lot more attention to younger children and physical abuse than to older children and child sexual abuse. They viewed youth workers as unprofessional. There was a project in the town where youth workers worked with those girls, and it seems quite successful. But social workers didn't want it to continue, according to the media. I can't say anymore because I don't know. And also of having financial consideration overriding intervention needs, because if they had to take the girls out of the town, this was much more expensive than looking after them in town. So there were three quite important issues. I just want to say about the first one that actually social workers are told you have to work with babies around physical abuse, any other type of abuse as well, but babies get priorities. And this type of work is actually much shorter usually than the work that you need to put in if you want to do a good job with girls who have been sexually abused. So there are quite a lot of issues here. We hear a lot more about the police at the beginning in August 2014, and we continue to hear about the police. It's not listening, it's blaming the victims, it's blaming the parents. And very few perpetrators over 14 years, this is a very long time, have been actually brought to trial. There's a racial issue here. The perpetrators, as far as we know, are Pakistani men, and the victims are only white girls, according to the media report. In the country as a whole, this is not the case. There are more perpetrators who are white, and there are white and non-white victims. But usually there are very few Pakistani girls that we know of. When we say non-white in England, we usually mean Afro-Caribbean girls. So this is another issue. So we have here an intersectional issue: race, gender, class, religion, as well as sexual abuse. The media doesn't come with any proposed actions. Quite often the media does, but not in this case. The sense is this is overwhelming. They are out of their depths. They don't know what to suggest. But our politicians know. Our politicians seems not to even take the time to think about it. Like, they call for more legislation. Is legislation what is missing? UK has quite a lot of legislation about abuse of children. So this really in my view, it needed a lot more thought. And then, we had that very blatant government reaction about the criminalization of social work. Again, a good question: is this going to sort out this? Is this going to help those girls? Is it going to prevent any case? I don't know, but we can think about it. And a local politician who says, I was too left-wing to admit that there is such a problem, which is perhaps a revealing thought. But also the fact that Rotherham, that particular town, is really for a very long time voting Labour and controlled by the Labour coalition, which is now in the opposition to the current government, which is conservative, is obviously an issue that has led some of the decisions. And the issue of what I call inverse racism. Lord Ahmed is himself a Muslim man, I think of India, not Pakistani origin, but I may be wrong about that. And he connects this particular abuse with terrorism and says that it's the lack of leadership from the mosque, of people who are really truly religious. Religion plays a very major part in their lives. It's the failure of the religious leadership. I can't judge, and this issue is not really taken up further by the media. But it is an issue that we need to consider. And when I met the other day someone who knows a lot about the Pakistani community, she said to me, the imams are paid so little and their posts are not permanent, that they are actually under threat all the time. So most of us have no knowledge of that. So judgment is being made without really knowing the full facts, but this is an interesting thought. Now the jail report, on the other hand, unlike the case report, called for more social workers in recognition that if you work with this group of girls, you need to do it over a long time. There's no other way. You need to know how to do it, even in the long term. But you really need to have a small caseload and work for a long time. And this is not what we have at the moment. We have shortages, considerable shortages, and the priorities are Yes, they are for child protection, but for the younger children. So she calls also for earlier detection, earlier prevention, and more longer support. So very, very different from the case report. Completely different set of recommendations. Okay? My conclusions at this stage, which obviously are very tentative, because this is a case that is unfolding literally in front of our eyes. And I'm glad we have here Bridget Law, because she has responded as the chief executive of P.zza, and also there's some articles about responses to what the government is doing in particular. We have to take on board the media coverage because it does represent different sections of the public. We cannot ignore it. Because if really we ignore it, then our partnership with the public is being, it's really being damaged. Now, I did get the impression that the media was only trying to use, the sensational language it does use across the board, also for quality papers, as an instrument of moral panic. I think the role of the media is much more complex than that. But on the other hand, I had to ask myself, is this case, I think maybe it does justify moral panic. Maybe we should be in a state of moral panic, that we allowed it collectively, all of us, not just social workers and not just the police, to continue for such a long time. So in some ways, the media is by alerting us, by not allowing us to forget it, is doing a positive, something positive, and has a positive role to play for all of us. Equally, the way some of this is reported is about inciting quite a lot, in fact, about the racial issue, quite a lot of hatred, I would say. I don't know, I think it's very difficult for the Pakistani community to respond to this. But I did find myself thinking they were all married men. What happens to their wives? What happened to their children? How are they responding to that? And this is something the media has not done. I don't think you can do it in a hurry, but we need to think about that as well. There is a role for responding to the media, which is mainly at the moment the role of the National Association. I see our research as hopefully helping the National Association to think together what are good ways of responding. And I think we also, as social workers, we need to soul search ourselves in terms of our views about this particular group of victims. Even if half of what they say is correct, there is a problem. And I hope also that this particular case study does demonstrate the methodological complexity of analyzing media representation. Thank you very much.